found something there. But the one that's in the home goods too. That's a good one.
So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, the first things is that the request that I made yesterday about you guys emailing me a screenshot of your grade was unnecessary. I'm able to see your grades, so that's good. I will note, however, that the grades from this last quiz are significantly lower than the previous quizzes, and that sort of illustrates how hard this stuff is. So there's a lot of details associated with it, and the details are going to continue for today and tomorrow, and then Monday we have an exam, and Wednesday we start fresh with a new unit. So Wednesday we're going to start fresh with with the nervous system and nervous tissue. We don't have class on Tuesday because that's election day. And if you can, please vote. And if you vote for a guy that looks like me, well, not like me, but at least he's an older white guy, right? I'm not quite that old, but I don't know. I don't understand.
Don't vote for that guy.
So I won't tell you who I'm voting for, but
I think
I'm
that gives
voting
it away.
for a female. I won't tell you who though.
Yeah.
But please you should vote. Another thing that is very important, so Thursday I'm going to be so freaking tired because my daughter has a game at LaSalle Thursday night or Wednesday night in field hockey, playoff game, and so it's a big deal for her. She's got practice at classical tonight until like 9 o'clock or something like that out on the. Or you? No, it's not me. She's driving, so I'm just like, see you at home.
How old is she? 17?
Excuse me?
She's 17?
No, she's almost 18.
It's when she's 17.
So she's almost 18. Well, she will tell you that she's almost 18. Yeah. So yes, she's
When's
17.
her birthday?
December 4th.
She's not
And my wife's birthday is December 3rd, so it's really hard for me to forget my wife's birthday because I remember my daughter's birthday. Don't tell her. I said that.
I mean, that's kind of the way that I remember my mom's birthday because my brother's birthday is like 7 days before
Yeah.
hers.
the men we marry.
Or is it 7? It's either before or after. I don't know.
or
It's one
after.
of those.
The other thing is yesterday I was in a hurry and I sent my wife a text. Good morning, honey. I love you. But I always do that, right? But I have all these old text messages, and I was in a hurry, so I copied and pasted. Well, last Friday I said, "Good morning, I love you, TGIF." I was a dog walk, and so I copied and pasted it, and she was like, she caught me, and so you don't even have the time to. So she's giving me a hard time. My daughter was too last night, so I got in trouble. But I sent the text, and I actually wrote it out today.
Good.
So, any questions about what we're doing this week?
Quiz. No, mini practical.
Mini practical on what?
Posterior muscles.
Posterior.
Muscles.
So both the axial and the appendicular skeleton, so I'm dividing it according to anterior versus posterior muscles. The largest posterior muscles that you can see, both superficial and deep, some deep muscles, right? Rotator cuff muscles, there's just 2 of those, and I brought those up last week. So what I'm trying to do here is, not surprising, I think I've been trying to do this all semester, is to get you to do 2 things at once. First of all, stay up to date with the material and keep studying as we go. And secondly, anticipate what we're going to be talking about. So behind me is some muscles that is one example of a muscle that I've already talked about yesterday, so I remember that. But also we've talked about it in the context of last week in the mini practical, the week before. So many of these muscles, I'm doing this on purpose. You have repeated exposures to this material, and if you have repeated exposures, the likelihood that you're like, oh, wait a minute, I remember this, is higher, right? And if you then can say, you can categorize material, I know this stuff I'm a little shaky on, oh my God, I did terrible on this stuff. Maybe you should start studying that stuff that you did really poorly on. One part of that is, right, so that muscle tissue quiz that yesterday, that's going to be a quarter of the exam next week. So once again, that's something that you should need to anticipate. Okay. So yesterday we finished up talking about muscles and anterior. So this is the way the book divides it is according to axial and appendicular muscles. And so this last muscle that we spoke about yesterday was the sternocleidomastoid. We talked about the differences between origins, insertions, and actions. And then in the context of this muscle, I talked about many muscles. For instance, the biceps brachii has a single action. This muscle, and there's several others that like it, have two actions. The action are unilateral action and bilateral action. Bilateral action refers to both sides of sternocleidomastoid working together, and unilateral means one side relaxes and the other side contracts. Once again, yesterday we talked about origins, insertions, and actions. And if you wanted to find the origin, insertions, and actions of these muscles, it's your best interest to go to these tables or to these slides and find what those origins, insertions, and actions are. So in other words, go here, don't go somewhere on the internet. Okay, the internet will provide you with information. It may very well be correct, but if it's different than here, then one of the things that I'll do is, right, you could get it wrong. So in terms of the trapezius right here, the trapezius is a superficial broad back muscle. It is a diamond-shaped muscle. The origin is right down the midline of the body, and it's the spinous processes here. And so if you look at this, so just look right here. It says occipital protuberance, nuchal ligament, spinous processes of C7 to T12. I'm surprised that it says C7 to T12. I would think that it's all the C vertebrae, but it would just be a typo. But regardless here, what I'm going to be focused on are the spinous processes of cervical and thoracic vertebrae. That's what I would ask you to remember. That's the majority of the organs. Now, in terms of the insertions, there's several of them, and they all play a real significant role. And so these are examples here that you would need to know. The acromion process, which is continuous with the scapula, the scapular spine rather, and then anterior from there is the clavicle. So the acromion process and the clavicle have that really important AC joint as part of the muscle, as part of the shoulder. And so then what does it do? Here we will skip this nerve, this cranial nerve right here. What does it do? It will extend and laterally flex the neck. Okay, what is it? What are we talking about here? We're talking about pulling the scapula posteriorly, moving the scapula medially. Those are better descriptors than what this book says. Okay. So again, now the trapezius is a muscle that you should be familiar with, not because it's something that you've been tested on, but it's going to be one that you're tested on this week. Muscles of the face tend to be, there's a number of these muscles, and I'll point out a few of them on this picture on the left-hand side. We haven't talked about many of these muscles. And so again, now if you don't remember about these muscles, that's because we skipped them. So the occipital frontalis, the frontal portion of the occipital frontalis, that's something that we have talked about. I haven't talked about the zygomaticus major. I haven't talked about the zygomaticus minor. And that term zygomaticus means something. If you remember from the skeletal system, the zygomatic arch and the zygomatic bone, right? Those are both things. The mentalis on the left-hand side, that's right down near the mental foramen, the mentalis, and then the risorius. Then these two right here, the levator labii superioris and the depressor labii inferioris. And then the easy ones are orbicularis, the two orbicularis muscles. This muscle right here, this platysma muscle, I'm surprised that it's actually even labeled because it's a very superficial muscle. So these are, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 muscles in this picture that we haven't talked about. And those are all muscles that are related to facial expression, particularly the movement of the lips, the elevation or depression of the lips, and smiling and scowling. And then the other muscles as well, the ones that we've already talked about. If you look at this picture right here, this is an example of a slide that if I were you, I would cut out a piece of paper. I would take a screenshot of this, cut out all of the terms, and label them 1A through whatever it is. Just label the ones that you're interested in. Which ones are you interested in? I'll tell you in a second. Label the ones in a particular way, and then just write the labels down over and over and over again. Is that going to be asked of you on the exam? No. Is that more difficult than what I'm going to ask of you on the exam? Yes. So you want to study harder for the exam. You want to study questions that are harder than what will be on the exam. The exam will only ask you for recognition. So if you start in the lower right-hand corner here, I just mentioned that thing, that platysmal muscle. That's something that is not there. So this depressor anguli oris, bless you. That's not on there, and I think, so this muscle right here, where my pointer is, should be the depressor labii inferioris. So the depressor labii inferioris and its cousin levator labii superioris are muscles that are inferior or superior to the lips. You have the two muscles, the major and minor muscles. The minor is closer to the midline. The major is further away, and that's the zygomaticus major, and zygomaticus minor. In both cases, the zygomaticus major and the zygomaticus minor reach up here, partly either to the zygomatic bone or to the zygomatic arch. And then in terms of the action, what do? Elevate the lips. If it's above the lip, it's elevating. If it's below the lip, it's depressing. I'm going to skip over the orbicularis muscles, right? You know, the oris and oculi, right? The occipital frontalis, I'll skip those two, the frontal version and the occipital version. But the one thing that I haven't mentioned and I didn't ask you about was this epicranial aponeurosis, and I mentioned this yesterday, that tendinous fibrous connective tissue. This is connecting those two muscles, and so that's why the book talks about it either in the context of separate muscles or sometimes joint muscles, because one pulls and it pulls on the other one as well. Another muscle that is somewhat deep, but in the book and then also on the models, there you can see them. This is called the temporalis muscle. That temporalis muscle, the origin will be a combination of the temporal bone and the parietal bone, and the temporalis muscle will reach down to the mandible and will aid in elevating the mandible. Another mandible elevator will be the masseter, and that's the muscle right here. And then there's a couple other muscles that you're already familiar with, the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid. So these facial muscles, there's a lot here, and this would be a very useful figure. This figure here is straight on, and we have all of these muscles here. The one that isn't labeled, and I'm not sure why, and I missed this last year, I think, but you see where my pointer is? So first of all, if I underlined it in red, you need to know it's on the list. This one right here, this depressor anguli, you don't need to know that. This one right here is going to be, is the opposite of this. So the levator labii superioris and the depressor labii inferioris. That's this one right here. Again, we have the zygomaticus major and minor. The zygomaticus minor is medial. The major is lateral here. We have another going from medial to lateral here. We also have the risorius muscle. The mentalis muscle is right over the mental foramen.
On our part, we don't have the underlines.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Okay. So there's an activity for you to do that. Okay. I mean, it's not in the,
No, I'm on the slides and
it's not in the bright space?
Yeah.
So, okay, so then I'll update that.
Okay.
Alright.
And then the other muscles up at the top, those are pretty straightforward, right? Okay? So there's lots of small muscles of the face. And once again, I'll ask you questions that are either, that are text-based questions without reference to pictures, and then also picture questions with reference to the picture. So for instance, this diagram or the previous diagram. Here's another version of the real cadaver. You just waving? Okay, no worries. And again, some of the muscles that we need to know. Pay attention to the muscles that you need to know, ignore the ones that you don't need to know. So the occipital frontalis and orbicularis oculi, the one thing I'll talk about here is the action here, moving the scalp, raising the eyebrows. That's the action in the occipital frontalis, and the orbicularis oculi help close the eyes. I don't worry about the orbicularis muscles, the origins and insertions, because they're circular, and so they sort of are odd, and so they are different. Right? So the orbicularis oculi, I'm not worried about the origin and insertion. The orbicularis oris, I'm not worried about the origin and insertion. But these two right here, the depressor labii inferioris, the levator labii inferioris, they're doing opposite, and the name tells you what they're doing. So depressor labii is inferior to the lips here, and it depresses the mouth or the lip. Levator labii will elevate the lip, and once again, they do not do both. They do not do two things, right? So the muscle. So if the lip gets depressed, then something has to act on it in opposition to elevate it. The four more muscles here. Natalis is inferior to the lower lip. And then the last three muscles here, going from lateral to medial, I went from medial to lateral. So a minute ago, from lateral to medial is the rhizorius, the zygomaticus major, and zygomaticus minor. The insertion here, or angle of the mouth, and then orbicularis oris of upper lip. I would say angle of the mouth or the upper lip. All three of these will have the same insertion. They all will have the very same action. And so what's distinct here, or what, they're just slight distinction. The only thing that, the origin is the same. The only thing that's different here is the location on the face, right? So that's the one thing. So again, from lateral to medial or medial to lateral, the name will change. The term mastication means elevating and depressing the jaw. You cannot elevate if you don't first depress. So the muscles that are elevators, they're strong elevators. I already told you about those. Those are the temporalis and the masseter. So let's talk a little bit about the muscles associated with depressors, and they're not very big, and there's not very many of them. And if you look right here, here are the two big ones, the masseter and the temporalis, and those are the strong elevators. In terms of the origin of the temporalis, I thought I was going to go somewhere else, but we'll just talk about this for right now, elevation. In terms of the origin of the temporalis, what is it? What's the origin going to be? It's going to be the temporal bone. It will also include the parietal bone and some of the frontal bone, right? And where does it insert? In the coronoid process of the masseter. Okay. And then if you look at this, not the masseter, the mandible. I'm sorry. If you look at the masseter starts. Its origin is where the zygomatic arch is cut here. So it's part of the origin is the zygomatic arch. And and its insertion is in the angle of the mandible. So can you just give me a couple minutes just to get through this one?
I would love to learn about muscles in the face.
So we're talking about chewing right now.
Oh,
So here are the lists of the two muscles here, that is to say the temporalis and the masseter. There are other muscles. There's a lot of other muscles of the face. These are the muscles I was thinking about. That these are depressors. Right? These depressors are not clear. The depressors are sort of hard to look, to find, but the main one here is right there, called the digastric, and that term digastric has two parts to it. There's the digastric is a muscle that it's a weird muscle. It inserts on the inferior portion of the mandible, and then it attaches to the hyoid bone, and then from the hyoid bone, another muscle takes place and it inserts on the clavicle and the sternum. So basically, you have this pulley system that's pulling on the jaw to open up the muscle. The one muscle that I will ask you about is the digastric. There's others as well, but you can see the digastric right here. There's an anterior portion of the digastric and a posterior portion of the digastric. So that digastric is this part right here. There's a lot of muscles associated with both speech, swallowing, and then opening of the mouth. And here's the digastric. And I don't think that the mylohyoid is on the list. I'm pretty sure it's not. If it is, well, it's right here. I don't think it is though.
On our side, it's not. It's grayed out on our side. It's just.
No. I mean, when I'm talking about the list, the list the list of muscles in Brightspace.
Oh, for
So
the
that's
lab?
so both the lab and the lecture should have the same muscles that are possible on that list, right? And so I made it for the lab and then I copied it to the lecture. There are other muscles associated with the tongue, and I don't think that we need to talk about any of those. But let's talk about movement of the eye. And now, next semester or next time that you guys take AMP2, we'll start right here, not literally, but we'll start on this topic, not in this room, and it will start talking about eyes. The eye is a special sense organ, and so that topic of special senses is what you'll start with in AMP2. This refers to what's called extrinsic muscles of the eye. Muscles that are on the outside of the eye, and they will help you go like this, look over that way, or your favorite, right? And my daughter's favorite too. Ariane, don't do that to me. Why'd you roll your eye? So these muscles, now you need to know, first of all, if you look at the names, rectus, 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 there's 4 rectus muscles. And the term rectus means parallel to something. So now, what is it parallel to? If you look at this, these 2 pictures, I'm not tall enough to reach them. This is a lateral view of the eye here, and the direction of the eye is roughly, it's not quite a circle here, but anterior to posterior. So these muscles are parallel to the length of the eye from the front to the back. And that's indeed what's happening. So there's 4 muscles that are parallel to the front to the back, and then there's 2 muscles that are at obliques. You have external and internal obliques. You also have inferior, superior obliques. And by the way, I'm definitely going to mess those up. I'm going to mix those up on exams, right? So the inferior and superior oblique associated with the eyes. The external, internal obliques are associated with the abdomen. The oblique muscles run at an angle, and they help rotate the eye or laterally move the eye. And the rectus muscles, depending on where they are, the muscle that elevates the eye is superior to it. The muscle that depresses the eye is inferior to it. The muscle, now, my right side, if I want my right eye to move, first of all, I can't stop my left eye from moving, right? It has to go. But if I want to move my right eye, and I want to look over there, my lateral rectus will contract, and my left eye, my medial rectus will contract. So the lateral and medial rectus contract on different sides, on different eyes. So now I'm looking over there, and then I want to look over there. Lateral rectus and medial rectus will. Now, if I'm looking up, then I don't, I'm just trying to say this plane like this and this axis right here. I'm not worried about looking at an angle. You have a question?
Obviously, like, it's not like, it's pretty off topic, but when people can, like, do like 2 ways, like with different eyes, like looking different ways, is that something wrong with their muscles, their eye muscles?
So if you're,
If
if
it's
you
not
know,
moving together, no, like, like one eye can move to the other if you keep the other straight.
Or like a lazy eye?
so it depends on the condition, right? So most of the time, what I'm familiar with is, Joanna just said, was the lazy eye. And what people, that's typically present in children. My nephew had that once, but one of the things they did was the one eye was, they diagnosed which rectus muscle was relatively small, and so they covered the other eye, and they made that the eye that was not used as much. They tried to work that muscle, basically, or those paired muscles. So in that case, it's musculature. There are definitely going to be cases that I am not aware of that's going to be nervous as well, and I don't know anything about that.
What about like when one of your eyes drifts? Like it stays in the normal position, but like if you like, it also can become a lazy eye. Is that also a muscular issue?
A temporary one, it would be most likely going to be a muscular thing, but I don't know the answer to that. So there's 6 muscles right here, and one of the things that you should recognize is look at this picture right here on the bottom. This picture right here, I definitely will use. It's already on the exam. How do you know that this is the lateral rectus? Why isn't this the medial rectus? They're on opposite sides of the eye. This definitely is a superior rectus, and this is definitely the inferior rectus. No question about that. But how can you tell that? Well, what's this right here? This is the skull, right? So I'm going to show you some context right here. Now, this context is really, this, without it labeled, right, this would be hard to identify. I will definitely show you this stuff. Right? So this part right here is part of the frontal bone. So you're basically cutting it right here, right? And so that's what so you're seeing now. This is a lateral view. So which eye are we looking at? Well, look right here, right there. So we're cutting the skull right here. So this is a right eye. Okay. So if it's the right eye, then this has to be the lateral rectus, and it's looking that way. There's the superior oblique and inferior oblique, and when I ask about those, is those help rotate the eye, or yeah. So I don't worry about the direction of the rotation, because again, we have 2 eyes, so one's doing clockwise rotation, the other's doing counterclockwise rotation. So that's why I talk about that. So let me see here. So in terms of the action for the obliques here, where elevate and laterally moves the eye, elevate and laterally moves the eye, or depresses and laterally moves the eye, right? The rectus muscles, all we're going to be doing is saying for the lateral muscle, it moves the eye laterally. For the superior one, moves the superior, inferior one, moves the inferior, and the medial one moves it medially. The key there is that when you're talking about the medial and lateral rectus work in concert to one another, in other words, they work together, so that if both eyes look to your right, one is contracting, the other is relaxing. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about trunk muscles, but before I get into trunk muscles, I want to take a break, and I'll let Ms. Binninger speak to y'all. And
Forms. Yeah. Are they good forms or bad forms?